I want to talk about the effects of debt and what it can do to people.
Yes.
And I find the stat that 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck.
That's crazy.
I find that interesting when I hear the statistic that 67% of millennials consider themselves philanthropists.
Interesting.
So if they're both in this 60 percentile,
Yeah.
then that means some of these people are living paycheck to paycheck while also giving their very last dollar, seemingly.
Right.
That's what it feels like. So let's talk about the effects that happen when you have debt. Because I think a lot of people don't realize just how deeply ingrained debt impacts your life.
Oh, yeah.
You have a creativity block because how can you think about creating something when you have to think about your four walls and just being secure?
Yeah.
Imagine the anxiety knowing that I owe thousands of dollars back to the government for student loans.
Yeah.
And that burden and cloud does not come off of you until that last dollar is deposited and you're free. Again, it just it breaks my heart because the debt doesn't just happen with our money. I think we're in so much debt with our time too.
Yeah.
How few people do we know that are genuinely generous with their time? Would drop at a moment's notice to help you when you called them.
Right.
Yeah. And I know this stat that is really mind-blowing. This is one of my biggest passions is 70% of people don't have a single person that they could call in the middle of a crisis for help.
So interesting.
Debt, I feel like, is underpinning a lot of issues for us. That's not just our finances, but our entire soul.
Keeping us limited.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, debt is a big danger, right? Debt, I think you've exposed some of the ways that it manifests itself. And so to debt, I would say the first thing is get discipline. Right. If you're hurting in debt, if you're a church leader and you're leading people that are in debt, the first ingredient is to get discipline, is to actually start living by principles. The first thing I actually teach to somebody, and this might seem counterintuitive, is when they tell me that they're drowning in debt and they can't get ahead and they're financially in bondage and it doesn't seem like they can actually grow in their finances and their bank balances and things like that. The first thing that I ask them, and this might seem kind of harsh or even crazy, I say, are you tithing? If they're in our church and they're seeking help, why would I withhold the principles of God for their life? The Bible says, bring all the tithes into the storehouse and see if I will not open up a window of heaven and pour out a blessing so large that you would not have room to contain it. God's window is so much bigger than even our room. And so how do we make more room for God to bless us? We have to honor him with a portion of our room so that he can fill it, so that he can exceed it. Right. And so, I asked that. And then the response typically is, well, Vance, I just told you I was in debt. I can't afford to tithe. To which I say, you can't afford not to. Because the way that you've been doing it obviously is not working. Most of the time, outside of maybe student debt, which is maybe a unique thing, but most of the time, especially if you're in credit card debt, it basically means that you're living off 110. And that's what a lot of my friends do. They don't even want to look at their bank account because there's so much anxiety. They don't want to see that negative bank balance. They don't want to see that overdraw, and things like that. And so they're typically, making 100, for example, and spending 110 each month. What the tithe does, it forces you to live on 90. What the tithe does is it sets a principle in motion in your life that, hey, I'm going to, no matter what, regardless, I'm going to recognize that at the end of the day, if I believe God, then I believe that he's a good father and he's my provider. So I'm going to honor him and declare his provision now over my finances. And so that's just an example. I mean, that's not the only thing that people need to do, but it's an example of discipline. Am I willing to put some disciplines in my life? And then I think that outside of that, people don't realize that there's a whole nother game to be played, which is growth. Right. And so a lot of times what people will do is focus so much on trying to cut expenses and focus so much on trying to save money that they don't think creatively about how to make more money. right?
Yeah.
And so there's this whole element of, okay, what's in your hand? When God says, I shall supply all of your needs, that's not literally money's going to come from the sky. I think manna came down from heaven in the Bible, but I've never seen it.
Yeah.
And so it's probably not going to come from the sky. That's likely not going to happen. Probably not. But when the Bible says he's going to supply all your needs, what it means is I've given you everything that you need to partner with me.
Great.
I've given you gifts. I've given you talents. And when we talk about the parable of the talents, we're not just talking about financially investing. Invest in your skill sets and see if that won't open up provision, new provision in your life, right? And so I think those are different ways. It's like discipline, but it's also, you were actually saying it earlier, creativity.